All right, I've been waiting all couple of days here to talk to our next guest. He is Show Me Institute Director of Development, David C. Stokes. First, David, let's get to University City because we had a policeman talking about your hometown of University City and how they are being financially irresponsible in cutting to the bone firefighters and causing more firefighters to pay overtime, which in turn costs the city more. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. How do you respond to Mr. David Stokes?
Well, as you're in your conversation last week showed, or the topic was, yes. I mean, University City, the voters there rejected a few bond issues in April, and yes, that put the city in a bind. And I was strongly opposed to both of the bond issues and was glad that they failed personally. But what you have now is the city council trying to exercise fiscal discipline in how they handle their staffing needs. There might be, as your guest last week just went, there might be staffing issues in University City right now. They might have to figure some things out in the long run. What we don't have in University City right now as a resident is a public safety crisis. When they say that there was a fire department, one of the two firehouses was shut down for a few hours, and it was about 12 hours. That's really, they try and make that sound, if you've read the comments online about it, that's some sort of huge safety deal. It's not. We have another firehouse in University City. We have other cities all around that will provide support for the calls that might get in at that time. It's not a public safety crisis. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with, but the union wants to deal with it through higher spending and more jobs for union firemen. That's fine. I understand where they're coming from. But as a resident, I want to see the city council exercising fiscal discipline and holding the line on taxes as much as possible.
But to his point, though, that you have to have X amount of people staffed at your place. If there aren't enough firefighters, then these people have to work overtime. So you're paying them more money to work overtime, whereas it would be cheaper if you paid another firefighter, for that time instead of paying the current firefighter overtime.
Which is why there are legitimate staffing issues that need to be dealt with. And yes, you might, in order to cut down on that overtime, might need to hire a few more firemen. But I try and follow this pretty closely, and I think you see a city manager in University City who's trying to, as I said, exercise fiscal discipline. And I don't think you should just go off and hire a bunch of people because you have a short-term overtime issue. You should deal with it in a long-term plan and come up with some smart hires. And if you have to hire another person or two or three, that's fine. But let's have them know that most of the responses that you get, as was made very clear in your interview, are of the paramedic variety. You don't need the full truck going to the vast majority of these responses.
Right.
You just need the paramedics out there. And I know firefighters are all cross-trained, but you can send the ambulance. Not every call results in 6 men on a truck going to it, or shouldn't at least.
If you have a heart attack call, you don't need to send the fire truck,
which they often do in St. Louis County, and that's one of the issues with fire services in our communities. You have these fire departments, fire districts, all over the county that do that. They send the truck because they've got the people and they're available. So I guess it's a good thing that they'll send the truck, but it also needs to be taken into consideration that most of the calls can be handled with 2 or 3.
All right, David Stokes, there's also another topic here, and that is Governor Nixon vetoed the minimum wage bill, saying, that's sort of convoluted, but saying there was a bill that said that cities couldn't set their own minimum wage. Also in that bill, there was in that bill that said that cities could not ban plastic bags in their towns. Now, I ask you, as somebody who likes local control, if one city decides that they don't want to use plastic bags, why can't that city take it upon itself to ban plastic bags?
Well, I've got to step back there. I've actually as somebody with conservative libertarian political beliefs
Yeah.
and philosophy, you might assume I always love local control, but I think local control can be highly overrated in many instances.
Especially when you're against it.
No, it's like the ticket citation law, the Max Creek law. That's an example of the state telling cities what they can and can't do. And that's a great example of cities abusing their authority and the state stepping in and saying no. And I think this is the same thing. Now, I'll admit that the minimum wage proposal is more important to me and far more harmful than maybe the plastic bag ban.
Right.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with states stepping in and putting limits on what cities can and can't do. The state constitution and state statutes lay out the authority of cities very clearly. And when cities unilaterally try and move past that and do things that state statutes don't authorize them to do, I don't see a problem with the state stepping in and fighting this, particularly when they do something as damaging as substantially increase local minimum wages in St. Louis and Kansas City.
Now, what's interesting about this is I thought there was a law that said you couldn't have a bill with two different laws in it.
There is. That's in the Constitution.
Right.
I don't think that's a problem here. These things are related. It's not that you can't
Minimum wage and plastic bags are related.
because they're related in that they're the county the state setting limits on what local governments can do.
Right.
The law, the constitutional thing you're referring to, says things within a bill have to be related, and it's abused all the time.
Right.
There's many, many examples where things get passed that are completely unrelated. But I don't think in this case it's a problem. If it's the state telling cities what they can and can't do, I think it is basically the same umbrella.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, it's one thing to say you can't raise the minimum wage. It's another thing to say you can't ban plastic bags. I mean, there might be a community. I am outraged, if I'm allowed to be outraged, as much as I can be over plastic bags. One who doesn't recycle at all. I throw it all in the same. I'm not an environmentalist at all. But if a community wants to go ahead and ban plastic bags to make it more environmentally friendly, to save on gas, right? You're sending your troops overseas for part of the gas reasons. You want to do your part, and the town gets together and says we're going to ban plastic bags. That town should have a right to do that, I think.
Well, I don't necessarily.
Okay.
And I think if they do, the people there can work and elect people to the state legislature who will rescind that bag. But let's not make it just about that town. Now the grocery stores that serve that town, many of them might be chains. I mean, they've got to now spend more money to treat how their stores in Columbia, because Columbia is the city that began this, that the Schnucks or the Walmart or whoever in Columbia now have to do things differently in that city. And I don't think if Columbia bans plastic bags and another city bans paper bags, then no, I think there's a rule for consistency in these laws across the state. And while I agree that the plastic bag ban may be getting a lot of attention, I want this bill to pass because of the minimum wage issue.
I understand that, but
which is in it.
But that's my argument, is that there's two different things. I actually agree with you. I don't think states or cities should set their own individual minimum wage. But on the same token, I do think cities should be allowed to ban plastic bags. Well, so in that sense, I think these things are two unrelated things.
Well, I would like it if all bills passed in Jeff City were very tight, one topic only.
Right.
That would be great. That doesn't happen, and there's far worse examples of unrelated items passed, which then people can sometimes successfully sue and get things overturned. And I have, on that issue, they're unrelated within the same bill.
Right.
I have no doubt that if this veto is overridden, as I hope it will be, that the Municipal League will sue. They will raise the unrelated item objection as a part of their lawsuit, and we'll see how the courts rule on that. I think the courts would say that these are close enough in relation to let it stand.
Right. I also think that these counties that are banning the sale of cold medicine over the counter, like St. Charles banned over the counter sales, whereas St. Louis City hasn't and St. Louis County hasn't. You're seeing an influx. And some of these rural communities have as well. You're seeing all these meth heads come into the city and the county. So since the state won't act, then the county and the towns can act. And so, what is the point of a town and voting for a town mayor and a town city hall and dog catcher if they're not allowed to make any laws pertinent to their community?
Well, they are allowed to make plenty of laws. The state statutes set out the authority that cities and counties and school districts and everybody else has under what you can do. So I would object if the state passed a law telling Chesterfield what its local park hours are, or how much or how if the state stepped in the University City fire staffing situation. There are certain things that are city responsibilities, county responsibilities, and so on. You don't see the state telling cities how they can and can't zone, because that's a city responsibility. But when cities and counties, whoever, try and take on new laws which aren't authorized, sometimes whether or not it's a good thing or not, I do think that in some cases the state is proper to step in and say, no, you can't do that.
All right, to blow your head up even more, David Stokes.
And it's already been blown so far. So we can.
I will agree that cities should not be able to give individual TIFs to individual companies to cut taxes against other communities, right? So that should be a statewide. If you're going to ban towns from plastic bags, you should ban towns from giving individual TIFs to individual companies for that individual town's benefit, to the detriment of all the surrounding towns around it.
Absolutely. And we've been fighting for years at the Show Me Institute for significant changes to state law of tax increment financing and other subsidies, and at the same time removing the authority of cities to decide on TIFs and moving it solely to a county level TIF commission, which you have in St. Louis County, but they also have the absurd municipal override, so that the city, Ellisville or Shrewsbury, with 5,000 people, their city council can override the county TIF commission of representing 1 million people.
Right, but what's more damaging to the community? Banning plastic bags, or giving Walmart a TIF to build a Walmart that puts out of business all the other towns and all the other small businesses that have been living and playing in that community for generations?
Well, what's more damaging? There's no doubt that the tax subsidy and tax credit policy in this state is extremely damaging to our tax base and our economy, and is in dramatic need of state and local reform.
I say stand up for the plastic bag. Stand up for the banning of the plastic bag. That's what I say. David Stokes, when can we read you? When can we see you?
We have a new website that I meant to push last week on the show. We've revised showmeinstitute.org, made it more video, more easier to function, I think. So I hope people check out showmeinstitute.org, and people can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
David Stokes, have a good week.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Kelly.
Bowen Dental Care.